Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at, of course, what is going on in Sindh, especially with regards to the elections that have been happening yesterday regarding the local bodies. And of course, when we talk about the elections that have been happening, there is much to debate regarding what different parties have spoken about with regards to the ECP and, of course, allegations of delays and hampering with the results. Something, of course, that the ECP has denied and has claimed that because it is a lengthy and complicated process, with each RO having about 5 union councils, which means it has about 25 constituencies, it takes a lot of time for the results to come in. And this is why we've seen that a lot of parties have talked about how these results should have come by now. But again, the process itself is time consuming. There are parties such as the JI, PTI, who've been claiming these allegations. But so far, we've seen that according to the results, of course, the PPP is leading in a lot of the union councils, about 150 out of a total 246 that have come out so far. This means that the PPP is leading on about 80 of them. JI has second place with about 49, PTI 29, Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz around 6, JUF 2, while Tehreek-e-Labbaik and an independent have won 1 seat each. And of course, these are unofficial results that have been coming in, and there have been many others that continue to pour. So we're going to be taking a look at what these numbers mean, especially with regards to how this process is going to go forward, and also with the entire election process itself, with the kind of allegations that have come forward and the developments that have taken place prior to the election themselves as well, especially with regards to the MQMP also boycotting the elections due to issues of delimitations, which they had earlier pointed out to the ECP, but were of course not taken into account since they were already marked prior to the objections raised. And so we're going to be taking a look at what that means for the alliance between PPP, MQMP, and then of course what that means at the center. Specifically, of course, as the results coming in, what it means in terms of the post that is going to be held, especially of the mayor of Karachi, something that the PPP has said they will not be having any conversation with the PTI regarding, and so they are sure that this is going to be something that has been that is going to come from the PDM, but who exactly, of course, is going to be able to become the mayor is still something that we're going to be talking about in our show today. In our next segment, we're going to take a look at another political development which has come in the form of the PTI chairman Imran Khan referring to the return of PTI lawmakers in the National Assembly in the context of a conversation around a caretaker setup, while simultaneously PTI leader Fawad Chaudhry has also hinted towards this return, but perhaps for a different purpose. Fawad Chaudhry has spoken about how they are mulling over the return of PTI lawmakers to the National Assembly with regards to a no-trust motion against the Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif, and what sort of legal actions and possibilities exist for the PTI to be able to do that, especially without coming back to the Assembly, because of course the resignations from the PTI lawmakers are still something which is the decision regarding which is still pending in the court. So we're going to be, of course, seeing whether or not that actually happens. Meanwhile, the Interior Minister Rana Sanaullah has also spoken that PTI is, of course, welcome to the National Assemblies, and they had already, of course, earlier expressed themselves at the fact that this is an undemocratic movement and this is a place for political discussions to take place, and that they must return. And so that decision is welcome, but that no conversation around a caretaker setup will be had prior to the end of the current government's tenure, which is going to end in August. So we're going to take a look at what this means in terms of the political developments and what sort of options even exist for PTI, and what this means for the current political setup and the way that they would like things to go forward. For this and more, as always, I've been joined in the studios by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi, and we've also been joined for our first segment online by Ms. Shama Junejo, who's a political analyst, and Syed Kumail Hyder Shah, Chairman Local Council Sindh. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us and being a part of the debate today. Let me start with you, Ms. Shama, with regards to, of course, the way that we have seen the situation unfold, and the way that we have seen the entire issue with regards to the results coming in with the Election Commission and different parties raising objections. What do you see in the overall context so far as to how the elections have been conducted, the kind of allegations that have been raised, and the way that different political parties moving forward are going to accept or reject the results? Ms. Shama, are you with us?
Hello.
Yes, Ms. Shama, can you hear me?
Hello, hi. I know I can hardly hear you, but I couldn't understand.
Okay, I'm going to repeat the question for you. With regards to, of course, the elections happening in Sindh, what do you make of the developments so far, especially in reference to the allegations that have been raised by parties such as the PTI regarding the hampering of results taking place and the delay in the results coming in?
Yes, it is. It is quite unexpected result because PTI was pretty sure, and even though that PPP and JI's position was very strong in Karachi, particularly after MQM's boycott, I was expecting, like many others, that PTI will fetch a reasonable amount of seats, but the result was really surprising for all of us. And that result indicates many factors. That one thing, that their social media power is really strong, that they change the perceptions and the ground reality of the situation, like it has happened in Karachi. Also, the atmosphere or the situation is not favorable to them like it was in 2018. So the results of these local body elections have really, it is time for PTI to sit and think that what should their policy be for general elections, and especially in Punjab, because these elections, especially the results, that the way they have completely been wiped out, is really alarming for their party policy. Now now if I come to the results in general, PPP has secured around 80 seats, but they are still not in position to form their own mayor. So they have to go in alliance with either with JI, which is more. I see that it is a new alliance can be formed, or with PTI, which Said Ghani denied that it is not possible. Or there is another situation that PTI and JI can go for a joint alliance and then can form the mayor. But I don't know that who will be the mayor in that scenario. Now the delay in election results is really worrying because it is not the like remote areas, or it is not like general elections or for provincial elections. So it is raising questions that why there has been delay, and the transparency of election, despite the statements of election commissioner, the provincial election commissioner. I'm really not satisfied on the justifications that there has been delay. It shouldn't be, because it is really clogging the transparency of the all results in general.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Kumail, considering, of course, that what Ms. Shama was referring to was the fact that this is something that is, of course, a concern in general, also with regards to transparency in elections, and also in terms of what that means of party acceptance of the results, and then, of course, the way that this election in the aftermath is going to proceed. So considering, of course, the fact that what the Provincial Election Commissioner has termed as a complicated and lengthy process, especially with each RO having 5 union councils, which means it has 25 constituencies, is this delay that we've seen so far something that is expected and is part of the process as far as the constituencies and counting is concerned, especially, of course, references being made to the fact that there isn't the transmission system involved that was back in 2018? Mr. Kamal, you'll have to unmute yourself because we are unable to hear you. Yes, go ahead, please. Mr. Kamal, we're unable to hear you. Can you please unmute yourself and speak again? We'll try and get back to you once the issue in the connection is resolved. But Farrukh, considering what Ms. Shama has said regarding the political angle and the fact that the kind of expectation with regards to the results was perhaps different, especially for the PTI, what does this mean in terms of how some of the leaders from the PTI are also claiming that the results are being hampered with the fact that PTI is so popular and is not being reflected in what the results are showing so far is an evidence of that fact. Is that really so?
Right, Sana, regarding PTI, of course, I'm going to talk about that. But first, let me pay tribute to Pakistani media, because so far the focus has been such that certain realities are pushed out of focus, right? The first thing is that it was second phase of Sindh's local election. There were 16 districts where elections were taking place. But you will hear merely a debate about Karachi or at best Hyderabad, nowhere else. Rest was carried by People's Party with comfort. So that has to be borne in mind. The second thing is that when you talk about Karachi's election, the turnout, we don't have the final numbers, but the estimate is that the turnout was somewhere between 20 to 25%. So everybody is at this moment reaching a conclusion about popularity or unpopularity of certain political parties, but nobody is focusing on this huge hole in the presence of voters. What exactly happened there? Usually, whenever you have elections, the turnout is somewhere between 55 to 65%. So you clearly can see that 25 to 30% or 35% people did not show up for voting. And nobody is focusing on that either. So we have to first address those two issues, otherwise things cannot move ahead. Regarding overall results, it is clear that People's Party has carried the day. It has been very successful in the rest of Sindh, in Hyderabad also, and in Karachi as well. Now, the fact is that the result, the way it is coming, was to be expected. Remember, Karachi's composition is very interesting, 80-20. 75 to 80% Muhajirs and 20 to 25% basically are other communities, Sindhis, others, right? Or urbanites, elites. So the voting public that went to the poll, they had various clusters and ideological configurations. People's Party, of course, was the most comfortable choice because it is also ruling Sindh. Then the second one was Jamaat-e-Islami, but you know Jamaat-e-Islami has limitations of its own support base because they are very ideologically driven, but they are reductive. Third was PTI, because PTI has been ruling in the center and Karachi was most generous in 2018. It did not deliver. And it is clear that PTI was losing the thread, and it can blame anybody whom it wants. But the fact is that situation is before you. PTI seems to have destroyed its brand. Unfortunately, in Punjab, elsewhere, it is still breathing because media keeps on cutting them slack. Otherwise, I don't think they have the kind of appeal anywhere in the country right now because of multiple bad choices that they have actually gone for.
All right. Mr. Kumail, I hope you can hear me well, and we can as well. Can you say something for me, please? Unfortunately, we're still unable to hear you. Can you please unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now?
Okay, let's try again. Unfortunately, we're still unable to hear you, but we'll try and fix the connection. But let me go quickly to Ms. Shama before we do that. Ms. Shama, considering, of course, that when we take a look at the issues, and I really wanted to get Mr. Kumail's opinion also on the delays, but in terms of the developments that we have seen, there is, of course, what is happening now with regards to the delay in the elections results. But prior to the elections also, we saw, especially with regards to the MQMP, boycotting the elections was a significant challenge, specifically for the PPP as well. Of course, it has emerged victorious in a lot of the seats, but that alliance, of course, has also had an impact and perhaps will do even post the elections. What do you make of that? Ms. Shama, can you hear me?
Hello. Yes,
Yes.
I actually can't hear you, but I was trying to listen to your question through YouTube. So I don't know what's wrong with. So because the relay is like 10 seconds delayed, so I only heard the beginning bit of your question. So I don't know what did you ask.
Okay, let me repeat that, and I hope that you can hear me this time. I'm referring to the boycott of the elections by MQMP and the impact that this has on PPP. Of course, we've seen that it still has emerged victorious in plenty of seats, but in terms of this election and then in the aftermath of this election, what impact do you think this will have on this alliance?
Honestly, their boycott is actually, it will damage the needs of their own people. It is really not in the benefit of Karachi. And also 90% of people, is if I am right, or if not 90%, at least 80% of people have boycotted. So once they have boycotted, they are not in the electoral system. And when they are not in the electoral system, we do not know that what was their opinion and what kind of their representatives they needed to go into the union councils or to be their mayor. So it is like totally blackout. So it is not only, I mean, whatever political, what should I say, that their reservations were, but still they shouldn't have boycotted. Now, there are so many other
okay. All right. Point taken, Ms. Shama. Thank you very much. Let me quickly go to Mr. Kumail and try and see if we can hear him this time around. Mr. Kumail, if you can say something for me. Can you hear me?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Can you hear me now?
All right, great. Third time's the charm. Okay, so Mr. Kumail, considering, of course, that there has been a lot of delay in results, I'd like to go back to the original question that I posed with regards to whether or not this is expected in terms of what the Provincial Election Commissioner has been referring to, the kind of constituencies that are involved and how each RO has a lot of obligations to cover. And also in terms of the way that we see this particular election unfold, the kind of allegations that have been coming out, will that be taken as part of normal practice, unfortunately, or the fact that there is any cause of concern that can be looked into?
Yeah, see, so in this LG election, this is the second phase which we just held in Karachi, and the Karachi and other 7 more districts in this part of Sindh. So it contrasts very well, and in these elections, these complaints are used to be done from the different political parties, which couldn't get the fruitful result. So they used to say these things, the results are delayed and they are tempered. Because of this election, this is a huge election. This is, actually huge than a general election, because in each ward, in each constituency, there are so many wards and municipal committees and municipal corporations, district councils. So the result has to be get the more time what we take in general elections. So that's why these political results takes time. So I don't think so. It must be tempered, because 80% result has been declared, announced from the different ROs overall this phase B. But you see what the question you raised before in your intro, okay, how this result is suddenly, the Pakistan People's Party took over in the Karachi or Hyderabad. So there are many reasons on which Pakistan People's Party delivered good things in Karachi, and the failure of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf when they were the 4 years government in the federal, and they didn't deliver anything. They only claims and falses on other parties. So that's why the people, they are thinking, they are seeing the electric buses in Karachi, they are seeing the different type of works in Karachi, they are seeing the underpasses in Karachi, the solid waste management in Karachi. There are so many things which the Pakistan People's Party delivered. So that's why this change, and like Ms. Shama told you, just the other party which can change the result, they boycotted this local body election.
Right, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mr. Kumail, for joining us and for taking the time out and being a part of the discussion. Ms. Shama, considering that this is, of course, an important discussion in terms of what are we going to look ahead, you pointed towards the kind of coalition that needs to be formed, especially with regards to the mayor position. But in terms of how the MQMP has boycotted the elections, moving forward, do you think that also be devoid of any sort of coalition formation, both in the province and, of course, otherwise as well? All right. Thank you, Ms. Shama. I think we won't have time, but thank you very much for joining us and being a part of the discussion. But Farrukh, considering, of course, what Mr. Kumail was speaking with regards to the delay and then expected results, and especially when we talk about the kind of issues that are being raised, is this also unfortunately part of the way that we now see elections in Pakistan, as you were pointing out, to much valid and larger concerns such as the turnout of people? Is this also not something that perhaps needs to be taken into account? Why is it that every time this is something that comes with the package in the elections, that there has to be allegations moving forward?
Right. And Sana, that is true. I think that throughout my experience of Pakistan's political history, I've learned that only one party wins, the rest of them proclaim that there was some kind of cheating that went on. We are bad losers, we don't lose well. But having said that, this time now this has become fashion that you start accusing even before the election starts. But while other parties, and I think that if you go on streets and conduct a poll, and I not only went for a straw poll, but I also worked with focus groups, right? So my understanding was that this was how things were going to shake out. Now the most important thing is what you have been asking repeatedly, and that is MQM Pakistan. And I think there are two reasons why they boycotted. One is the very legitimate concern about delimitation and how various seats were removed or they were shrunk, right? That is very important concern, and I think the system will have to start listening to that. The second thing was that there is a kind of shift that has to take place, and it hasn't, because the system at no level, no point was ready to entrust them with all the powers that were needed. The transition from MQM Altaf or MQM London to MQM Pakistan. And that is very important because Altaf Hussain also boycotted the election. And since earlier, because of certain leaders who actually decided to part ways and now they have come back, and because there was this lack of focus on constituency building and focus on their development, MQM-P was removed or delegated to Syed, and somehow PTI became the mainstay, right? I understand that everybody shrugs their shoulders whenever identity politics is mentioned, but you'll have to actually realize that identity politics can only be removed when the identity involved feels comfortable enough to forego that identity. And that is not happening. So all these parties that we try to actually impose on Karachi, or we think that they are going to be nationalist, Pakistani nationalist parties, that they create problem. So someday, I think MQM-P will have to be listened to now that it has consolidated, all factions are together, and they'll have to be empowered. Once you do it, I'm sure that Karachi will be healthier and it will be performing better.
All right. Well, of course, that is the hope, and we hope to see perhaps that sort of change even now, and then, of course, in the coming elections as well. But so far, of course, the results that have been coming in point towards the PPP's lead, and we'll be giving you more updates as more results are piling in. For now, we're going to move on to our next segment, which takes a look at the political dynamics at the center regarding the PTI chairman's claims and a reference towards the return to the National Assembly by PTI lawmakers, something that has been reiterated by other PTI leaders such as Mr. Fawad Chaudhry. For this and more, we've also been joined online by Dr. Niaz Murtaza, who's a senior analyst. Thank you, Dr. Niaz, for being a part of the discussion. And let me start with you, considering that when we take a look at many statements coming in from the PTI, there's always a question mark attached attached to whether or not is something that they're going to go ahead with. But with various conditions, of course, especially developing in Punjab and in other areas of the country as well, do you think that this could possibly be something that we can see anytime soon coming in from the PTI, despite the fact that the issue of their resignations is still pending in the court?
Well, I mean, it's very hard to, figure out what part of PTI's narrative to believe because, I mean, it sounds fairly strange. The only reason that they left dissolved KP and Punjab assemblies was so that they could put pressure to get the National Assembly dissolved. And now that once they have dissolved them, they're talking about going back to the National Assembly, the very assembly that they want dissolved. So I don't know what kind of strategy PTI has in mind. I mean, of course, there is the chance that if they go back to the assembly, stay there, they might be able to orchestrate a vote of no confidence or a vote of confidence. The national government, the PDM government, is fairly precariously placed with just a margin of 2 or 3 votes, and if the PTI goes back, then the thing is that the Raja Riaz-led group will have to go back and get absorbed in the PTI bigger group and then follow its instructions. So, if they are going back from that point of view, yeah, then I think it might make sense. They would have been in a better position to topple the PDM government at the center through this maneuver rather than, all these long marches and, resignations from Punjab and KP. So it just shows, fairly immature politics, lack of clarity, and, very emotional kind of lenses being used in terms of development of strategy.
Right. Farrukh, what was said by Mr. Fawad Chaudhry was also that there is going to be perhaps a possibility that they're going to discuss or see if exists or not for a no trust motion to be held or the return to the National Assembly being held without actually taking back or withdrawing their resignations. Is that even something that can possibly happen within the Assembly?
Right, Sana. I think that both these issues are they have merits, and I'm going to try to actually focus both of them. The first, Imran Khan Saab's statement. I think Imran Khan Saab knows one thing very well: how to stay at the top of news cycle. And changing conversation, by the way, because until day before yesterday we were told that in Karachi people will come out in droves and they will vote only for PTI, and even in Sindh we will see PTI becoming the leader or in all aspects. That did not happen. So how do you actually change conversation? You start focusing on the federal. And because your media is totally without any depth and it has very narrow, RAM, random access memory of processing power, they immediately started running after the dog without seeing whether their ear is still on their face or not, right? So this is exactly what they have been doing. I think that Imran Khan Saab has finally realized that all that, hokum or that propaganda that PTI is sweeping the country without any problem is just based on 2 circumstantial evidences. One, Punjab's by-election, where they got 10 seats out of 20, and then national by-elections where they got 6 out of 8 seats, right? And that was a very peculiar circumstance because at that time there was this impression that somehow your establishment is divided. Now that is not the case any longer. I don't think that anybody, any secret help is going to come to him. So he is going to create distractions, but it means nothing. The second thing, of course, they have been saying earlier that they are going to ask the president, actually order the president to order the prime minister to take vote of confidence. I don't think that is going to happen. President, last I checked, is the highest office in the country. So what do? You ask him, he says, look, I will do it whenever I want. So then the second thing is you can go back to the assemblies. Now the assembly situation is amazing because, as was pointed out by Dr. Saab, a big chunk of their party is already disassociated and they still are sitting in the parliament. If they go back, those people automatically get de-seated because their leader is going to actually take over. and they are going to unseat them. If that happens, vote of no confidence, and the number game still goes in favor of the government, right?
Okay.
The second thing is how to go back. Your own deputy speaker approved your resignations, at least as per your own narrative. You have not succeeded, and you have quit already. So in the end, the problem is the only reason we are listening to it and why everybody keeps on obsessing about it is A, our shallow media, B, because of the economic conditions, everybody wants some kind of consensus, right? Sadly, that will never happen. Even if PTI comes back to the parliament, it would want the system to burn down till the time Imran Khan Sahib does not become Amir al-Momineen.
All right. Dr. Niaz, considering, of course, that there is an issue of the narrative also attached, and there was a reason why these resignations took place. But unfortunately, we've seen that over the past year or so, PTI has shed many of its narratives. And because of that, there doesn't seem to be a lot of value in what they claim as part of a principled stance that they need to take. And so, do you think that will this move of coming back to the National Assembly for whatever reasons, even if it is to oust the current government, will have any impact on their initial narrative or their following? Because a lot of the other things that have happened didn't seem to.
Well, I mean, the thing with narratives and with followers is that, whatever Imran Khan says in the morning, it's forgotten by the evening. And if he says something completely opposite, you'll get 10 people who were justifying the morning statement, now justifying the evening statement with complete aplomb and, without any problem. So, that's the thing with narratives. But what it shows, especially the Karachi results, what it shows is that, the narrative is not as powerful as has been assumed so far, that, PTI is just on the verge of, sweeping elections. I think trying to, project from by-elections to the general elections is like trying to project from T20 match results to test matches. General elections is a much more arduous exercise spread over the whole country with so many, seats at stake. And then, given Imran Khan's injury, then also his security fears, it's not clear how widely he will be able to, go out and do campaigning, because, he's a big asset for the PTI, his ability to go around and, motivate people, mobilize them. So it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's an open field, especially after the Karachi result, as to what is going to happen. But obviously, the PDM has to get its act together. This strategy of, their main leaders sitting abroad and trying to, run the party from abroad. It's clearly not working, and they have to come back and take over the leadership and give a strong narrative. And, for the Punjab Assembly, now that the fact is that it's not going to be held with the National Assembly, gives an opening to the PDM, because, if both elections were being held together, the focus would have been on federal government issues more. But now, at least, the PDM can try to build a narrative that, look, these elections are provincial elections. So let's talk about provincial issues. And there the stark contrast is, 5 years of PTI government led by either by Bazdar or even by Elahi, versus a much better performance of, the PMLN government under Shehbaz Sharif from 2013 to 18. So they do have, an opening. So they need to grab it, because, politics moves very quickly. And, if they're going to take ages just to decide who's coming back when, then, even this opportunity might be lost.
Right. Farrukh, there is also, of course, the conversation that the Interior Minister has had in terms of how there is going to be no possibility of any conversation of any caretaker set up prior to the general elections or the end of the tenure. But what could possibly be any conversation regarding a caretaker setup that was referred to earlier by the PTI chairman in his announcement with regards to this particular move?
Right, because they PTI actually managed to surprise the PDM coalition by actually bringing down the House of Cards, that was Punjab Assembly. They have this advantage of these insinuations and implications that somehow they are in control of their circumstances and they are in contact with powers that be. And that's why in this interview, while he was talking about caretaker setup, he actually mentioned, Imran Khan Sahab mentioned that he sees elections taking place in April. So as I kept, if you remember the last time I told you that Imran Khan Sahab somehow wants to actually rekindle the hope that elections take place before the end of April, so that he is in a position where he can change certain leadership positions within the armed forces. So that bit also kicks in, and one day he says perhaps it is the election is not going to be soon. Another day he's going to say that they are very soon they are going to happen, but there's no point to it, right? Because it is merely talk for the sake of talk. Even if Imran Khan Sahab comes back to the parliament, I don't see that there is going to be end of assembly. Of course, vote of no confidence could be such a thing, but how do you actually muster up numbers when there's the whole idea was that MQM is so angry with the center and the provincial government that it is going to part its ways. But that hasn't happened. MQM has boycotted in local elections in Karachi, but they haven't actually announced that they are going to actually separate their ways. They have their governor. Why would they? They have a position of strength. They still have ministries at the center and in province. Why would they leave? So that makes no sense. And because People's Party is never going to dissolve its assembly prematurely, or even Balochistan, I don't think there is going to be an early election at the center. Because of that, Imran Khan Sahab can talk whatever he wants to talk, but that won't happen. Having said that, I wanted to very quickly address one point that was made by Dr. Sahab, and I very respectfully disagree. Karachi's situation can be projected to Punjab. There's a reason. More or less, the MQM base had already quit, and they had actually boycotted. Whatever remained was mini Pakistan. And if you can, see the result, and if PTI could not carry even that base without falling distant third, right? They cannot do it in Punjab either. In Punjab, there is this impression, as they say, media coming from Punjab, their sabun is slow, their soap is slow, so their processing power might be delayed by the media or pundits. But I think it is going to be same implication in Punjab also. His stock is very quickly going to decline.
Okay, just another thing, when we take a look at what you were referring to in terms of what may be one of the motivations behind calling the elections or hoping the elections are held in April, if we somehow pass that time period and that month, then what else will remain for the PTI to really hope for early elections?
Right. I don't know. Imran Khan Sahab just wants to prove to his own supporters that he is actually, whatever he says actually becomes a reality. But my problem is that I don't understand why do you have to actually postpone an election which is already due. It is going to approach within this year. So why are you trying to do it? What is this animosity towards the parliament? You tried doing exactly the same thing in 2014. Now you think that you can return to the parliament with the same ease as in 2014. This is not 2014, it is 2023. And you have alienated most of the people who were your fans at that time.
All right. Dr. Niaz, considering that the current political setup, of course, was initially trying to, of course, bring about a situation where we do not see the dissolution of assemblies, and unfortunately that actually did happen, and now, of course, there is a situation in Punjab, and maybe perhaps one will arise in KP as well. Despite that, of course, there's always been a reiteration of the fact that the government will be completing its tenure and the general elections will be held on their own time. But do you think that between now and then, can there possibly be any developments, especially with regards to provincial assemblies in KP and Punjab, that could perhaps change the scenario and open up the possibility of elections prior to that, and whether or not that even is going to make a difference, as Farrukh was pointing out, that we're so close to the actual date anyway?
Well, the thing is, the more the elections are delayed closer to, October, the more the graph of PTI in its narrative is going to run out of steam, and there is also a chance that there might be some improvement in the economy. I mean, already you can see from July at its peak last year to now January, there's been such a steep fall in Karachi at least. So that is the worry for Imran Khan. The more elections are delayed, the worse it is for him and his chances at the general elections. And that's why he's trying his best. But this was his last card. I don't think the federal government is going to buckle down under this pressure. And sooner he's going to find out that they will stick on and hold the elections when they are due in October. So then now the issue is that he's lost both his governments in KP and Punjab. He is facing a lot of cases in courts, and the police in these two provinces was giving him a lot of protection. And then there was the fact that they had money to spend in Punjab and KP and tried to shore up their position. So that's all lost. So I don't know what he's really trying to gain from this situation. The best that he can hope for is that he comes back with a stronger majority in Punjab, and then when the elections are held in October for the National Assembly in Punjab, that gives him an edge. But let's see if even that materializes. So all in all, I think it's just been very poor strategy.
All right. Another part, of course, of PTI's stance now is a lot to do with regards to the current economic conditions, and perhaps the previous narratives may have failed or so, but right now they've also been focusing on the fact that the current economic condition is a major aspect and is quite a big challenge. And so we come to a point where, of course, that needs to be debated upon, and both political parties will be able to, of course, look at that in terms of the time period from now and to the election. So how do you think that stance is going to play out in what you were earlier referring to as the fall of their initial narratives?
Well, the economy is the big issue because now you have what about 8 to 9 months left, and so far you still don't see the bottom trough. So far, things could get worse because we still don't have a deal with the IMF, and the reserves are falling so sharply. So until and unless the government can strike a deal with the IMF, get funds from other places, reduce inflation, the situation on the ground and across the country will remain bad for the people, and that could have impact, and that's something the PTI could whip up. Although the fact is that this crisis started under PTI because of its policies, and if it had been in power today, it may have been even doing worse than what PMLN is doing, because it had zero political capital in April. PMLN at least had some political capital, which it used to give some leeway to Mr. Mifta for 6 months to implement the IMF policies, and then when they ran out of their political capital, they brought back Ishaq Dar, and PTI would have had zero capital in April, so they would have been even more afraid to take any kind of steps which reduces their standing in the with the people. But still, I mean, the government has to take quick steps to give relief to people, otherwise this could come back to haunt them.
All right. Farrukh, considering what Dr. Niaz was saying in terms of the fact that this may have been something that has a huge, that PTI has a huge role to play in terms of the kind of economic challenges that we face today. But that, and even if that may be so, considering that when we take a look at where we stand today and the way that elections unfold, perhaps there is a lot of issue with regards to what is remembered and what is considered one political party's or the other's fault. And PTIs, of course, may have their contributions towards the scenario, but that was a long time ago. In terms of the way that people are going to look at the situation, in terms of what remains, especially in the kind of rhetoric that is being used or the kind of stances taken, also outside the economic domain, and even then the economic factors. That's a lot to do in terms of what's going to play out in the general election. So can we really say in terms of where we stand today, how these stances or narratives are still going to impact general elections later on in the year?
Right, Sana, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. Apparently, PTI's government was brought down as a result of a foreign conspiracy, which ensured that if Pakistan removes him out of power, then everything becomes hunky-dory and money will start flowing in like water. It didn't happen. Then we also saw that when Pakistan was going back to IMF for its review, at that time also we saw their former finance minister talking to two provincial finance ministers and telling them to sabotage the deal whatever way possible. And that is also a matter of record. I don't know why the government is not using that to its advantage, but otherwise it is not old news that PTI is actively trying to sabotage it. Now, I see some merit to the idea that if the economy really seriously deteriorates further, and it, foreign forex reserves go down and economy becomes really unstable, I see that there might come a time when the governments or the PDM might actually say, okay, enough, we cannot take this burden any longer. But how does it mean, or why does it mean that it is then going to lead to a general election? A state of crisis in the country calls for a very different kind of government, and that would mean that the technocratic setup that we kept on talking about and hearing about, that will kick in, because then you don't have monies to actually hold elections, right? In that state of affairs, you will see something else brewing. That's why it is not in the interest of PTI to make it impossible for the federal government, because I remember Benazir Bhutto Sahib was alive when Nawaz Sharif was removed by General Musharraf, right? At that time, many people distributed sweets everywhere. But what happened? Within few years, Benazir Sahiba was also complaining how intolerant General Musharraf was. Why? And then she lost her life as well. So in that kind of a state of affairs, fugue state, it is important not to push the system towards the brink. Otherwise, it backfires. There is a boomerang effect, and usually it is you who is hurt because you were the person who was pushing it towards the precipice.
Right, and that is of course unfortunate, and we hope that the political leaders who are part of the decision-making process, and of course with regards to the way that Pakistan is going to proceed further, think more sensibly as to how we're going to proceed. But thank you, Farrukh, for joining us in the conversation, of course, as always, and thank you, Dr. Niaz Murtaza, for being a part of the discussion as well. There's a lot that remains to be seen, both at what is going on in Sindh, in KP, in Punjab, and of course at the centre as well. But of course, we'll be here to talk about it and try to understand it a bit more. That's all that we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.